I walked into the courtroom that morning, and the first thing I noticed wasn't the humidity or the court reporter's questionable tie choice or the low murmur from the gallery. It was the smell. The room smelled like fear, thick, heavy, the kind that presses against your chest. I've sat on this bench a long time, and I know the difference between ordinary nerves and the kind of terror that makes a grown man's knees knock together. Officer Petrie Hawkins Bird, as I call him, stood at his usual post, but something was off about his posture. Normally, he's a wall of calm. Today, his hand hovered just inches from his belt, eyes cutting across the gallery. He gave me a small nod, the kind that says, "Watch yourself, Judge." I took my seat, straightened my robe, and looked down at the docket. Case 49, Plaintiff Arthur Miller, Defendant Marco Moretti. I looked up. On the plaintiff's side stood Arthur Miller, a man in his late 70s in a cardigan that had seen better decades, gripping a handkerchief like a lifeline, visibly shaking. On the defense side stood Marco Moretti. I've seen plenty of punks come through my courtroom. I've seen liars who think an expensive suit can hide a rap sheet. But this one was something else. 22, maybe, slicked back hair, a suit that probably cost more than Arthur's house. He wasn't standing. He was leaning against the podium like he owned the furniture, the building, and me along with it. Chewing gum with his mouth wide open. Smack, smack, smack. "Officer," I said, my voice cutting the silence, "get that gum out of his mouth before I have him swallow it." The gallery gasped. A few rough-looking men in the back row shifted uncomfortably. Moretti didn't move. He just stared at me with a lazy grin, slowly pulled the gum out, looked at it, and flicked it onto the floor of my courtroom. Dead silence. I didn't blink. I leaned forward, chin on my hand. "Pick it up," I said quietly. "Make me," he said. Let's be clear about something. I've raised children. I've adjudicated thousands of cases. I've sat across from people who'd done unspeakable things. A spoiled brat with a famous last name doesn't scare me. "Mr. Moretti," I said, dropping my voice an octave, "you seem to think you're at a nightclub. You're not. You're in my house. And in my house, we don't litter." Bird stepped forward, his frame throwing a shadow over the defense table. Moretti's eyes flickered. Just for a second, the bravado cracked. He bent down, picked up the gum, and shoved it into a tissue. "Thank you," I said, turning to the trembling old man. "Mr. Miller, you're suing the defendant for $5,000, claiming he destroyed your vintage 1967 Mustang. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Arthur stammered, his voice barely audible over the air conditioning. "I parked it on the street outside the bakery, went in for a loaf of bread. When I came out, he was on the hood." "On the hood?" "Jumping on it," Arthur whispered, tears rising, "smashing the windshield with a baseball bat. My wife, my late wife, we bought that car on our honeymoon." Something hot flared in my chest. I hate bullies. I hate people who prey on the weak. It's the reason I get up in the morning. I turned to Moretti, who was checking his fingernails. "Mr. Moretti, did you smash this man's car?" He looked up, feigning boredom. "Don't recall." "You don't recall taking a baseball bat to a car in broad daylight? Early onset memory problems? Or are you just not that bright?" "Watch your mouth," he snapped. The room froze. Even Bird looked surprised. I smiled, not a nice smile. "Excuse me, did you just tell me to watch my mouth?" "I said what I said." He leaned toward the microphone. "You don't know who my father is, do you? If you did, you wouldn't talk to me like I'm some street rat." "I don't care if your father is the King of England," I shot back. "You're in a court of law, and right now, you look like a common street rat to me. Actually, that's an insult to rats. Rats have survival instincts. You clearly don't." "My father is Antonio Moretti," he said, letting the name hang there like poison gas. I knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Antonio Moretti ran the largest organized crime operation on the East Coast from inside a maximum security prison. "I know exactly who he is," I said, unimpressed. "Inmate 78442. Last I heard, he was making license plates. Is that the family business you're so proud of?" Moretti's face went red. "You think you're funny? Safe up there behind your little wooden bench? Let me tell you something, Judge. Accidents happen. Brakes fail, houses catch fire, people disappear. The threat was direct, on the record. Most judges would have banged the gavel, held him in contempt, called for extra security. I'm not most judges. I sat back, arms crossed, looking him over like a specimen under glass. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts, he shrugged, regaining his composure. This is a waste of my time. Dismiss the case, old lady, and maybe you go home to your grandkids tonight. I looked at Arthur Miller, terrified, knuckles white on the podium, pleading with his eyes for me to just let it go so he could survive whatever came next. That's when I understood. I wasn't deciding a small claims case anymore. I was drawing a line. Mr. Miller, I said gently, look at me. Did you see him do it? Yes, Your Honor, I saw him. He laughed, told me it was because I parked in his spot. It's a public street. Do you have a police report? Arthur looked down. I called. They came. But when they saw who it was, they left, said it was a civil matter. Of course they did. Corruption. It made me sick. I turned back to Moretti. So you think you're untouchable because the local precinct is on your father's payroll? You think you can smash an old man's most treasured possession because you have a fragile ego and a violent streak? I think, Moretti hissed, you're going to dismiss this case right now, or else. Or else what? I challenged. Or else you'll call your daddy, I continued before he could answer. Let me tell you something about or else, Mr. Moretti. It doesn't work on me. I eat or else for breakfast. I picked up a piece of paper from my desk, the only real evidence Arthur had, a grainy bystander photo of a man in a distinctive, expensive suit swinging a bat at a Mustang. Is this you? Could be anybody, he scoffed. It's identical to the suit you're wearing right now, and the timestamp is from last Tuesday. Unless you have an evil twin with equally poor fashion sense, that's you. Objection, he yelled. This is a kangaroo court. Overruled, I shot back. And be quiet, I'm speaking. You don't speak until I tell you to. You're a child, a spoiled, dangerous child who has never once been told no. I leaned in. Well, guess what? Today's your birthday, because I'm giving you a big fat no. Moretti slammed his hand on the podium. You don't get it, do you? He pointed at me. Rule against me and my father puts a green light on you. You're dead. You hear me? Dead. The gallery erupted. Bird was already moving, stepping fully between Moretti and the bench. I held up a hand to stop him. Wait, I said, and looked Moretti dead in the eye without blinking, letting the silence stretch out until it hurt. You just threatened a sitting judge, on the record. You think your father runs the world? Let me introduce you to how the real world works, Mr. Moretti. When you threaten me, you don't get fear, you get consequences. I picked up my pen. Judgment for the plaintiff, $5,000. His jaw dropped like I'd slapped him. And I'm holding you in contempt of court. 5 days in custody, immediate transfer. You can't do that, he screamed, face twisting. I'm a Moretti. I just did. Officer, take him into custody. But as Bird reached for the cuffs, Moretti did something nobody expected. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He reached into his jacket. Bird shouted, hands! And the room exploded into panic, but it wasn't a weapon. It was a phone, held up, playing a live video feed. Look at the screen, he screamed, laughing. On the small display, a grainy, unmistakable shot of the parking lot outside the studio, and my car, with 2 men standing beside it holding gas cans. Rule against me, he sneered, and your car goes boom, right now. The room froze. All eyes on me. He thought he'd checkmated me, thought a car mattered more to me than the law. He was wrong about that. But then he grinned wider. You think I care about a car? I asked, staring him down. I think you care about what's inside it, he said. My stomach dropped. My dog Biscuit was in the back seat with the air conditioning running. My assistant was supposed to be picking him up for a vet appointment any minute. He'd done his homework. Tick-tock, he whispered. Dismiss the case, apologize, or the dog's toast. This wasn't a small claims hearing anymore. This was a fight. Before we go further, subscribe now, because what happens in the next few minutes is the part people can't stop talking about. For one long second, the whole room blurred down to that tiny screen in his hand. My heart hammered against my ribs. Fear, yes, but right behind it came something colder, rage. Moretti was grinning that smug, entitled grin that said, "I found your weakness, old woman." He thought he was playing chess. He'd forgotten I don't play games. I end them. "You're bluffing," I said, my voice giving away nothing. "Try me," he said, thumb hovering over the screen. I pressed send and they lighted up. Bird had his hand on his taser, eyes locked on Moretti, waiting on me. But if Bird moved, that thumb moved. I had to be smarter, faster. I sat down slowly, deliberately, and folded my hands. "Okay," I said. The word hung there, unexpected. "Okay, what?" "Okay, you win. I'm not going to sacrifice my dog over a $5,000 lawsuit. You're a smart young man, Mr. Moretti. Thorough." The room shifted, confused whispers rippling through it. Is she actually backing down? Arthur Miller's face crumbled. "Your Honor," he whispered, heartbroken. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes locked on Moretti. I needed his ego swelling big enough to block his own vision. "That's right," he laughed, relaxing, lowering the phone an inch. "I knew you were smart. Everyone's got a price, right, Judge? Even you." "Everyone has something to lose," I corrected. "Officer, stand down." Bird looked at me, brow furrowed. "Stand down, officer," I repeated. He stepped back, hands raised, eyes still drilling into Moretti. Moretti looked around the room, preening, soaking it in. "Dismiss the case with prejudice," he drawled, "and tell the old man he owes me an apology for wasting my time." "I'll do better than that," I said, leaning forward. "I'll apologize to you myself, on the record." His eyes widened. This was more than he'd expected. "Go ahead, I'm listening." "I'm sorry," I began, soft, drawing him in. "I'm sorry your father failed you. I'm sorry you think fear is the same thing as respect." I paused, glancing at the clock. 11:14. My assistant was never late, never. "And I'm sorry you didn't check the timestamp on that video." Moretti frowned. "What?" "The shadows," I said, pointing at his phone. "Look at the shadows on the pavement in your feed. Long, stretching west. That's early morning light, Mr. Moretti. It's almost noon right now. The sun's overhead." He looked down at the phone, confusion clouding his face. "And another thing," I said, sharpening my voice like a blade. "My assistant picked up Biscuit 20 minutes ago. I got the notification on my watch right before I walked in here." The color drained out of his face faster than water down a drain. "It's a loop," I said, standing to my full height. "A pre-recorded feed. There's nobody by my car. You're a liar, and not even a very good one." "No," he stammered, tapping frantically at the screen. "They're there, I swear." "Now," I shouted. Bird moved with a speed I hadn't seen from him before, twisting Moretti's wrist until the phone clattered to the floor. "Get off me!" Moretti shrieked, sounding less like a crime boss's son and more like a toddler mid-tantrum. Bird spun him and slammed him face first onto the defense table. "You have the right to remain silent," Bird said. "Use it." The gallery erupted. Applause, cheers, someone shouting encouragement toward the bench. I banged the gavel. "Order! I want order in this court!" The noise settled, but the energy in the room stayed electric. Moretti was pinned, cuffed, panting against the table. "Get him up," I ordered. Bird hauled him to his feet, suit rumpled, hair a mess, looking small now. "You tried to blackmail a judge," I said, looking down at him with open disdain. "Threatened my life, threatened an innocent animal, and you did all of it on tape. Do you understand what that means, Mr. Moretti? You're not looking at 5 days in county anymore. Extortion, terroristic threats against a judicial officer. I'm making a call to the district attorney personally. You're looking at 10 to 20 years. You wanted to follow in your father's footsteps. Congratulations. You'll be cellmates." Moretti slumped. Whatever fight had been left in him was gone. I turned back to Arthur Miller, still standing there, mouth open, clutching his handkerchief. "Mr. Miller," I said, my voice softening completely, "you came here for justice for your car. You're going to get it. Judgment for the plaintiff, $5,000. He nodded, tears running freely. "Thank you, thank you." "I'm not finished," I added, looking back at Moretti. "Since you've got the kind of resources that let you hire people to stake out parking lots, I'm assuming you've got assets. Small claims caps me at $5,000, but that tape of you admitting to the vandalism and the threats you made on the record, that's evidence, Mr. Miller. Take it to civil court. Sue him for everything he's worth. Get yourself a real attorney. Get a shark. Take his suit. Take his watch. Take whatever trust fund is sitting behind that smug little face. Arthur straightened up, looking taller than he had all morning. I will, Judge, I promise. Good, I said, as Bird started dragging Moretti toward the exit. Wait, Moretti grunted, twisting his head back. My father, your father, I interrupted, can't help you where you're going. Tell him something for me if you see him. Tell him the judge says hello, and that I drive a hard bargain. Bird shoved him through the doors, which swung shut behind him, sealing away the tension with a heavy thud. The room went quiet again, a good quiet this time. The smell of fear was gone. I looked down at my docket, took a breath. Next case, I said. The bailiff called the next parties in. A dispute between ex-partners over an unpaid loan. Routine, mundane, exactly what I needed. But as the new plaintiff walked in, a woman with too much hairspray and an obvious grievance, the side door burst open. Not a litigant, my producer Dana. She never comes onto the floor mid-taping, never. Her face was pale, tablet in hand. Judge, she said, voice shaking, stop tape, we have a problem. I frowned. I'm in a session, Dana. Unless the building's on fire. It's not the building, she said, ignoring protocol entirely, shoving the tablet toward me. It's the news, breaking, right now. I looked at the screen. Riots at State Penitentiary, hostage situation. And underneath, scrolling in red, crime boss Antonio Moretti escapes custody. My blood ran cold. I looked at the door Marco had just been dragged through, the son of a man who'd just broken out of prison. Dana's eyes were wide. Security says there's a black SUV blocking the lot exit. Armed men. They're demanding we release Marco. I stood up. The gallery murmured, sensing something wrong. Lock the doors, I said to Bird. Judge? His hand went to his weapon. Lock the doors. Nobody leaves. We're in lockdown. A siren started, faint at first, then closer. I looked at the camera, its red light still blinking. So the kid hadn't been bluffing about his father's reach. He'd just gotten the timing wrong. The or else was never the car. It was an army. I grabbed my gavel, didn't bang it, just held it, like a weapon. All right, I thought. You want a piece of this? Come and get it. Then the lights went out. Total darkness, screams, confusion. And in the black, a voice came over the studio speakers. Not the announcer, not Dana. A deep, raspy, accented voice. Judge, it said, echoing through the dark. You have my son. I have your courtroom. An emergency light flickered on, casting long red shadows across the walls. I stood there in the gloom, mind racing. I was trapped. My audience was trapped. And the most dangerous man on the East Coast was somewhere outside, or maybe already inside this building. I'm a judge. I interpret the law. I don't carry a gun. I don't fight cartels. But I'll be damned if I let anyone take my courtroom. Officer, I whispered into the dark. Here, Judge, Bird said, right beside me, solid, steady. Where's Marco? Holding cell, back corridor, secure. Keep him there, I said. He's our only leverage. Judge, Bird said low, we're unarmed against automatic weapons if they breach. They won't breach, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Police are coming. Police are busy, Judith, the voice on the PA taunted, as if he could hear us. Diversion across town, chemical spill, very messy. No one's coming for at least 20 minutes. Plenty of time. 20 minutes felt like an eternity. A hand found my arm in the dark. Arthur Miller, having crawled under the desks to reach the bench. Judge, he whispered, shaking, is this because of me? No, Arthur, I said firmly. This is because bad men think they can do whatever they want, and today they picked the wrong room. I needed a plan. I needed to stall. I needed to control the room, the same way I do every single day. Antonio, I shouted into the dark, projecting like I was scolding a deadbeat parent. Silence. Then a chuckle over the speakers. I'm listening. You want your son? Come in here and make your case. Or are you too much of a coward to face a woman in a robe? It was bait. Dangerous, reckless bait. But ego runs in families, and if the son was this arrogant, the father had to be worse. Make my case, the voice laughed. A trial for Marco's freedom, why not? You think you're right? I challenged. Prove it, man to judge. Come in alone, we talk. If you convince me your son deserves to walk, he walks. If not, well, you can try to hurt us all, but my officer snaps his neck before you're through that door. Bird looked at me, stunned. I squeezed his arm. Play along. A long silence. Static hummed over the speakers. Open the front doors, Antonio said finally. I'm coming in. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. He'd taken the bait. Officer, I said, open the doors, stay by Marco. The heavy back doors creaked open, and silhouetted against the hallway's emergency lighting stood a figure, tall, broad, in an orange jumpsuit, walking like he was dressed for a boardroom. Antonio Moretti walked down the center aisle, unarmed, alone, past the terrified audience huddled in the pews, and stopped at the same podium his son had stood at not long before. He looked up at me, scarred face, cold, dead eyes. Court is in session, Judge, he said. I sat down and adjusted my collar. State your name for the record. A sharp smile. Antonio Moretti, plaintiff. And who are you suing? I'm suing you, he said softly, for my son's life. I leaned forward. Then let's proceed. But be warned, Mr. Moretti, in this room, justice doesn't like interruptions. The emergency lights bathed everything in a sinister red. Shadows stretched long and warped across the walls. The gallery had gone dead quiet, except for muffled crying somewhere in the back rows. Antonio stood at the podium, relaxed, his orange jumpsuit stark against the dark wood, looking less like an escaped convict and more like a man used to running the room he's standing in. That's the danger of men like him. They wear chaos the way other men wear a good suit. You're suing me for your son's life, I repeated. That's a novel cause of action. On what grounds? Unlawful imprisonment, he said smoothly. Kidnapping, abuse of power. I scoffed. I held him in contempt after he threatened an officer of the court. He threatened me. That's not kidnapping. That's consequences. A concept I imagine is foreign to your family. And if I don't? I asked, keeping my tone conversational. Then the physics of the real world take over. I looked at him, really looked. He was enjoying this, the theater, the control. He wasn't just here for his son. He was here to prove his brand of power beat mine. You're a compelling speaker, Mr. Moretti, I said, but your argument has a flaw. You're assuming I care more about my own survival than my duty. He laughed. Everyone wants to live, Judge. Don't be a martyr, bad for ratings. I'm not a martyr, I snapped. I'm a grandmother. I have a lunch reservation at 1 o'clock that I intend to keep. But more than that, I have a job. You think guns let you dictate a verdict? That's not how any of this works. I stood up. You walked into my courtroom. You agreed to my terms. You want a trial? You get one. Officer. Yes, Judge, Bird said from the shadows near the holding cell. Bring out the defendant. You want him? Let's see if he still wants you. Antonio stared at Marco. The silence stretched long enough to hurt. You're right, he said finally. Marco's face flooded with relief for exactly 1 second. Marco, you're a liability. He reached into his jumpsuit. Bird shouted, down! But it wasn't a weapon. It was a radio. Burn it down, Antonio said into it. My heart stopped. No, I screamed. Nothing happened. No explosion, no shattering glass, just static. He frowned, clicked the button again. I said, burn it down, execute the order. Still nothing. Then a different voice crackled through, calm, American, official. This is tactical command, perimeter secured, your men are in custody, surrender immediately. Antonio froze, staring at the radio like it had turned into a snake in his hand. I let out a breath that felt like it had been held for a year. 20 minutes hadn't been 20 minutes. The diversion, the stalling, it had worked. The police weren't 20 minutes out. They'd already arrived. Well, Mr. Moretti, I said, allowing myself a small smile, it seems your wolves have been rounded up. Antonio looked around wildly, realizing he was trapped, alone, unarmed, in a room with Bird. He looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, Judge. I'll find you from inside, from outside.
Oh, shut up, I said. Done, tired, hungry. Officer, take him. Bird moved forward, cuffs ready. Antonio tensed, and for a second I thought he might actually fight. Instead, he looked at his son. Marco, help me. Attack him, now. Marco looked at his father, then at me, then at Bird, who was twice his size. Marco did nothing. Useless, Antonio sneered. Bird grabbed him, spun him, and slammed him against the podium. The cuffs clicked shut. The lights flickered back on. Full, harsh, ordinary studio lighting. The red gloom vanished. The audience, realizing they were finally safe, let out a collective gasp that grew quickly into applause, then a full roar. I sat back, hands trembling slightly. I clasped them together so no one would see. Order, I said, banging the gavel. Order in the court. The noise settled, though the energy in the room stayed electric. I looked at the two Morettis, father and son, both cuffed, both finished. Officer, please escort the defendants out to the tactical team and make sure the parking lot's cleared. I have a lunch date. Yes, Judge, Bird said, a grin breaking across his face as he hauled them both toward the exit. At the door, Antonio turned back one last time. You got lucky, Judge. Luck had nothing to do with it, I said. It's about being smarter than the other guy. Today, I was. Get them out of here. The doors closed. They were gone. I looked at Arthur, still standing there like he'd just survived something out of a movie. Mr. Miller, you okay? I think so. Did that just happen? It did, I said. And you're going to have a hell of a story for bingo night. Subscribe if you made it this far, because what happened after, once the camera stopped rolling, might be the part that stays with you longest. I stood up and walked backstage into my chambers and shut the door behind me, leaning against it for a moment with my eyes closed. Breathe. Just breathe. Sitting perfectly safe on the couch was Biscuit. He wagged his tail the second he saw me. Hey, bud, I said, scooping him up and burying my face in his fur. My assistant rushed in a moment later. Judge, oh my God, are you okay? The news is going crazy. They're saying you took down a whole crime family. I didn't take down anyone, I said, setting Biscuit back down and straightening my robe. I just ran my courtroom. Did you make the lunch reservation? Yes, but Judge, the press is outside. Hundreds of them. They want a statement. I sighed, fixed my hair in the mirror, reapplied my lipstick. Fine, I'll give them one. Out through the heavy double doors, flashes exploding, microphones shoved toward me, reporters shouting over each other. How did you stay so calm? Were you scared? What did you say to him? I held up a hand and the crowd actually went quiet. One thing, I said, voice clear. If you break the law, you pay the price. Doesn't matter if you're a nobody or a kingpin. In my courtroom, everyone answers to the same standard. I paused. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to lunch, and I'd get that microphone out of my face before I find you in contempt. I pushed through the crowd, head up, and got in my car. Still there, still shiny, untouched. Started the engine. Watched the chaos shrink in the rearview mirror. Just another day on the bench. 6 months later, I was sitting in my living room reading the paper. Headline, Moretti crime family dismantled. Father and son sentenced to life. I smiled. Justice can be sweet sometimes. My phone rang. A network executive sounding out of breath. The ratings for that episode, they're astronomical. Biggest numbers we've ever had. We want to renew. 5 more years, double the pay. I took a sip of tea. Double isn't enough. Triple, he said immediately. We'll talk, I said. But first, I have a condition. I want a new station for my officer set. The old one squeaks. And better snacks in the green room. Those pretzels were stale. Done, he said. I hung up, looked down at Biscuit asleep at my feet. You hear that, bud? Better snacks. He snored. If this one kept you on the edge of your seat, subscribe. There are plenty more where this came from.